Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a genuinely fascinating argument about the future of arts and artificial intelligence. Now, if you've been following the absolute explosion of AI imagery lately, you know the stakes feel incredibly high. But according to our source text, the artificial aesthetic, the real threat to traditional art isn't actually what you might expect. So let's map out exactly what's happening here.
Okay, let's dive straight into this. Will AI create more beautiful art than human geniuses? What's your immediate gut reaction to that? I mean, for a lot of us, the ultimate fear is that robots are simply going to outsmart our greatest human artistic masters, right? We worry that an algorithm will somehow spit out a piece with such perfect technique that it literally makes the great classics obsolete. But framing the debate around who makes the most beautiful art, that is actually missing the mark entirely.
The author addresses this head-on, explicitly pointing out that the real fear doesn't come from AI surpassing the traditional physical beauty of classic art. It's a really fascinating point. AI doesn't actually need to beat traditional artistic beauty to completely upend the art world. So that fear, the idea that AI has to defeat human genius in a pure one-on-one aesthetic showdown, it's basically a myth. Traditional works of art hold a unique physical beauty that simply isn't the target here.
So, if it's not about pure beauty, what on earth is it about? Well, the reality is much more sociological. The true disruption is the capture of the mass market. This profound shift isn't taking place in some isolated elite gallery. It's happening right on the screens in our pockets, every single day. The real disruption lies entirely in capturing the attention of the general public. It's a massive, massive game of volume and accessibility.
And this stark contrast brilliantly illustrates the core dynamic at play. On one side, we have what's termed elitist art. You know, those innovative, purely human creations born from sheer genius. But then, on the other side, we have these AI pseudo-works, which are generated and scaled specifically for mass consumption. The point the author makes isn't that one is inherently prettier than the other in a vacuum. Rather, it's that these two categories are now serving completely different functions in our society.
The whole argument really pivots heavily on human behavior. Let's be real, the vast majority of the general public will naturally gravitate toward these artificial manifestations. Why? Because AI art is ubiquitous. It's effortlessly accessible through our devices, so it just naturally becomes the cultural default. I mean, think about your own scrolling habits for a second. You likely interact with dozens of algorithmic creations on your feed way before you ever get the chance to visit a museum to see purely human art. Convenience absolutely wins out. Now, what's really wild about this breakdown is the sheer scale of the fallout, because when the masses shift their focus, the entire cultural power structure shifts right along with them. We are looking at a massive reallocation across four critical pillars of society: the majority of our collective attention, the bulk of the financial resources in the creative economy, the avenues for ideological control, and literally the sheer power of visual manipulation. All of these are going to be owned and generated by AI, directed right at the masses. It is a complete transfer of cultural infrastructure.
Let's walk through exactly how this builds, because our source outlines a very distinct logical chain reaction. Step 1, AI art becomes immediately accessible to everyone, everywhere. Step 2, the masses naturally begin consuming it daily, largely bypassing traditional art simply because it's easier. Step 3, those heavy societal resources, the money, the attention, the influence, they shift decisively toward these AI platforms. And finally, step 4, which is the most transformative part, out of all this massive consumption, a completely new aesthetic is born.
To truly understand why that fourth step is inevitable, we have to look back at history. The text reminds us that we already know just how crucial the masses are when it comes to validating any achievement at a social level. History is quite literally written by mass adoption. Whatever the majority of people accept, consume, and interact with, that ultimately dictates the direction, meaning, and value of human achievements on a broad scale. The masses set the standard. Always have.
So here is the absolute crucial point. We are actively witnessing the creation of a new common aesthetic consciousness, because the masses are just constantly feeding on AI-generated visuals. A generalized grid of taste and themes is being instituted at the communal level. Think of it like society basically agreeing on the brand new, totally artificial standard of what art looks and feels like. We are collectively downloading a new set of aesthetic rules.
And importantly, this new AI-driven grid of taste, it brings about a total break from the past.
This new communal consciousness is going to be fundamentally distanced from classical structures and values. Those historical standards of beauty, the deep reverence for physical technique, the appreciation of human struggle that defined art for centuries, those simply won't be the primary lens through which the general public views visual media anymore. It's a complete paradigm shift away from the classics.
Now, let's take a quick breather, because it is really important to note a key caveat the author brings up here. Human-made art is not going entirely extinct. Manual art, art made directly by human hands interacting with physical matter, that will absolutely continue to exist. The eclipse of human genius does not mean its total erasure from the planet. Human artists are still going to create, paint, and sculpt just like they always have. However, we have to look really closely at the new balance of cultural power. That surviving pocket of manual human art will exist, sure, but it's going to be vastly overshadowed. On one side of the scale, you've got this dominant, massively funded, culturally pervasive mass AI aesthetic, completely commanding the public's attention. And on the other side, manual human art survives, but really only as an insulated little niche separated from the daily cultural consumption of the average person. It becomes a highly specialized interest rather than the cultural baseline.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. If the sheer volume of AI-generated content is fundamentally rewiring our communal standard of aesthetics at a mass scale, how is this new artificial grid of taste going to shape what you find beautiful tomorrow? I highly encourage you to actively consider your own daily media consumption. Is your own eye for beauty already being shifted by the algorithms? It's a fascinating and maybe just a little bit unsettling question to ponder as we navigate this new era. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always look closely at the structures shaping what we see.